Now, joining us from Grand Lake Stream, Maine, at the annual gathering of economists is our senior economics editor, McKee. He's been with us through the numbers. He's also got with him the chairman and co-founder of Roubini Global Economics, Nouriel Roubini. Mike, take it away.
Well, Betty, you know, if you're talking to Nouriel Roubini, you're going to get a little bit of a different kind of take on the number. And while there's some happiness at the Labor Department and in the White House, Nouriel, you're not thrilled by this number. You don't think this is particularly good news.
No, I think it's a pretty lousy report. I mean, you created only 115,000 jobs. You need to create at least 150 just to stabilize the unemployment rate and preventing it from increasing. The only reason why the unemployment rate didn't go up, went down, is that 200,000 people left the labor force. If you look at the household survey, actually there were job losses. So the unemployment rate fell for the wrong reason, not because we're creating enough jobs to reduce it, but rather because people are becoming so discouraged they're leaving the labor force. So the average work week is flat. You know, in the last 3 months, average earnings have been also pretty much flat. So this is just a lousy report. It was just better than expected because the expectations were so bad that it was slightly better than expected. In my view, if you look at everything else, you look at the ISM, you look at the GDP number, you look at the consumption number, you look at housing, we are at the stall speed, and probably there is more than a 50% probability of a recession in the next 12 months.
You think we're in recession now, perhaps?
I don't know if we're yet formally in a recession, but we are at the point in which the growth rate is so low, is essentially first half of the year was less than 1% average, that is going to feel like a recession for most people, even if technically we're not yet in recession. Once you reach a stall speed, either you reach escape velocity or otherwise you go into free fall. I think it's more likely that we're going to go into a recession because at this point we're also running out of policy bullets. We're going to have a massive fiscal drag next year already baked in the data. And the Fed might be doing, you know, some more QE, but QE1 was 1.8 trillion, QE2 was 600 billion, QE3, if and when, too little too late, it might be 300 billion, and it's going to be towards the end of the year, and it's not going to make much of a difference. Last year, $600 billion of QE2 and $1 trillion of additional tax cut gave us a growth handle of 3% for 1 quarter, Q4, and then we went back below 1% in the first half. Now we have a fiscal drag rather than a stimulus, and we'll have a smaller amount of QE. So I think the likelihood is one of a recession.
Betty has a question for you, I think, from New York. Betty?
Well, that's right, Mike. I want to pick up from that. I mean, what QE, and I think you're partly saying this, Nouriel, what QE could actually create jobs coming out of the Fed?
I don't think that QE is going to make much of a difference. Last year, the only effect of QE was some amount of asset reflation that indeed the fall of the stock market occurred between spring and summer. But all that extra base money went into extra excess reserves of the banking system. They hoarded them. They did not lend them. M0 was growing and tripling, but M1, M2, M3 credit growth has been flat, if not falling. There was some weakening of the dollar. They should have improved net exports, but even that did not happen because when the dollar weakens, the dollar value of commodity goes up, so that essentially washes out that kind of effect. And we didn't see much of a recovery of the real economy, so there was a little bit of asset reflation. So if and when the Fed is going to announce QE3, I'm sure that for a few days the stock market is going to come up because people are going to say the cavalry is coming to the rescue, but the real economic effect of it is going to be just extremely small.
We've got just about 30 seconds left. You marked down your growth estimates last week. What do you see for the rest of this year?
Well, for the rest of this year, we see economic growth being barely around maybe 2%. So the average for the year is going to be around 1.5%, well below a trend growth of 3%. That implies a rising unemployment rate. And I don't think that next year is going to be much better, and it could be actually an outright recession.
Nouriel Roubini, always great to speak with you. At least we're in a nice place to relax from the number. Thank you very much for joining us today.